Hello, and welcome back to the podcast, where we explore contemporary issues through Indigenous feminist lenses. I am your host, Lauren Hansen. Today's theme is a comparative analysis, and we'll examine three powerful works that illuminate Indigenous women's experiences in the United States. First, we are Dancing for You by Cutcha, Risling, Baldy, Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline, Baldy, and then Joy Harrow's poem titled We. Together, they offer a layered and intergenerational portrait of Indigenous womanhood, past, present, and continuously resisting erasure. We are going to do an overview of the texts. We Are Dancing for You documents the revitalization of women's coming of age ceremonies, revealing how Indigenous women served as cultural leaders, reclaiming traditions suppressed by colonization. In Firekeeper's Daughter, we follow Donis, an Ojibwe young woman caught between communities confronting violence, jurisdictional failure, and community responsibility while navigating her own identity. Joy Harrow's poem, We, written by a U.S. native, is a collective rhythmic remembrance. It portrays Indigenous peoples' survival, creativity, movement, grief, humor, and ongoing fight for justice. I will now do a reading of this poem for those who have not heard it before. We were running out of breath as we ran to meet ourselves. We were surfacing the edge to find our ancestors' fights, and ready to strike. It was difficult to lose days in an Indian bar if you're straight. Easy if you played pool and drank to remember to forget. We made plans to be professional and did, and some of us could sing. When we drove to the edge of the mountains with a drum, we made sense of our beautiful, crazed lives under starry skies. Sin was invented by Christians, as was the devil, we sang. We were the heathens, but needed to be saved from them. Thin chance. We knew we were related in the story. A little gin will clarify the dark, and make us feel like dancing. We had something to do with the origins of blues and jazz. I argued with the music as I filled the jukebox with dimes in June. 40 years later, and we still want justice. We are America. We. Each one of these texts represents Indigenous women not as symbols, but as living, breathing people navigating complexity. In each one of these, it's a representation of Indigenous women. In Baldy's ethnography, Indigenous women emerge as holders of an ancestral knowledge, responsible for restoring ceremonies and reshaping the future. They are teachers, leaders, activists, and theorists of their own lives. In Firekeeper's Daughter, Indigenous women appear as protectors and survivors, grappling with violence, policing gaps, addiction, and governmental neglect. But they are also athletes, aunties, language keepers, scientists, and community organizers. In Haro's poem offers a third angle. Indigenous women are witnesses and carriers of a collective memory, moving through generations of joy, pain, laughter, music, and resistance. The poem opens with breathlessness. We are running out of breath as we ran to meet ourselves, capturing the urgency of living in a world shaped by colonial disruption. Together, these portrayals insist on Indigenous women's fullness, ceremonial, political, emotional, and creative. So, what do these texts tell us? Each text reveals something distinct. Baldy tells us that revitalization Indigenous women's ceremonies is a feminist act. Ceremony becomes a place where young women are affirmed, celebrated, and protected, countering the settler narratives that misrepresented or erased Indigenous women's roles. Boulley shows us how colonialism continues to shape daily life. Violence against Native women, cross-jurisdictional legal failures, and stereotypes. But her story also shows youth finding empowerment through knowledge, kinship, and cultural responsibility. Haro reveals the emotional texture for Indigenous life. Her lines move between humor, a little gin to clarify the dark, and then in pain. 40 years later, we still want justice. She reminds us that Indigenous experiences are not only political but deeply personal, embodied in breath, music, memory, and movement. Together, these texts tell us that Indigenous women navigate both oppression and profound cultural strength. The complexity through Harjo's poem. Let's look closely at Joy Harrow's poem, We, and how it deepens our comparative analysis. The poem is written in a collective voice, we, erasing the boundary between the speaker and community. This mirrors Baldy's argument that Indigenous knowledge is communal, not individualistic. Haro layers survival, humor, and cultural pride in lines like, We are surfacing the edge of our ancestors' fights and ready to strike. This echoes the revitalization movements Baldy describes. Women today rise from ancestral struggle and continue it. We made sense of beautiful crazed lives under the starry skies. Here, Haro recognizes the contradictions of Indigenous life, beauty and chaos side by side. This complexity also shapes Donis's world in Firekeeper's Daughter, where love for her community exists besides the danger and loss. Sin was invented by Christians, as was the devil we sang. This line directly criticized colonization's moral framework, just as Baldy critiques the anthropological dismissal of Indigenous women's ceremonies. 40 years later, and we still want justice. We are America. We. This final line connects to Firekeeper's Daughter, where justice for Indigenous women remains unfinished. Haro's Still America highlights the Indigenous presence at the heart of the nation, contradicting erasure. Through sound, memory, and collective voice, Haro gives us an emotional and cultural history that complements both The Firekeeper's Daughter and We Are Dancing Through You, through its contemporary storytelling and historical analysis in each. Her poem offers a spiritual and cultural dimension that shows Indigenous women as storytellers, witnesses, creators, healers, rebels, and carriers of integral experience and intergenerational experience. In conclusion, when we compare these three texts, We Are Dancing for You, Firekeeper's Daughter, and We, a shared message emerges. Indigenous women are not flat characters or stereotypes, they are complex and intergenerational figures living at the intersection of tradition and modern survival and revival. Baldy shows Indigenous women leading cultural resurgence. Boulley shows them navigating contemporary violence and responsibility. Haro shows them remembering, singing, resisting, and insisting we are still here, we are still America. And that complexity, political, emotional, historical, and poetic, it makes Indigenous women's experiences powerful, multifaceted, and essential to understand. Before we end our podcast episode, I would like to thank our two sponsors. Our first sponsor is Auntie Approved Energy Drinks, TM, for when you need the strength of 7 aunties telling you to get your life together. Flavors include Sage Citrus, Fry Bread Fuel Land, and Finals Madness. Our second sponsor is the College Student Survival Kit. It comes with caffeine tablets, half-broken laptop charger, 1 motivational sticky note, and 2 tears. Perfect for finals week. And this concludes our podcast. Thank you for listening. It's been a great honor to be able to use my amazing poetry analysis skills to get this episode together because I really do love some nice poetry. If you need any recommendations, let me know. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep honoring the stories that shape our world.